Joining me today is Brian Hoeig, who has over 2 decades of experience in the software industry, currently serving as the CEO of MSP 360. Brian has played pivotal roles in shaping the trajectory of several well-known companies and has a wealth of experience spanning business development, R&D, sales, finance, operations, and customer experience. He brings invaluable insights to the forefront of technology and market strategy. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Hey, Kevin, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here, and I get to know a little bit more about your community, and thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, you got it. So I've been looking forward to this because there's a push in this industry. I think our data shows us there's a significant push into this kind of platform concept, right? There are certainly, and this is how the marketplace evolves, but there are certainly single product, led companies, point product companies, but more and more so, I think the industry is kind of shifting towards this kind of concept of platforms, and MSP 360 is right at the intersection of that. So, certainly timely from a market and trajectory standpoint, but I want to kind of peel back into this platform and where you guys are, what you got out there in the horizons, and then kind of get into your background as well. So if you'll indulge me, but thank you for hopping on the podcast. So let's start with just a real basic overview of MSP 360, because I mentioned platform play, kind of in the RMM PSA space. So take me through this platform.
Sure. So I joined the team in 2019. To kind of give you a little bit of an idea. Back then, it used a name called Cloudberry Lab. And Cloudberry Lab it's a strong backup player, been around for a long time. One of the very first in the industry to be backing up to the cloud. Started almost like 11 years ago, right? And as we started when I joined the team, we started to look at what is it that we wanted to become, right? What was our goal? Where did we want to fit in the market? And you started to look around, you saw that you had a lot of RMM players that were partnered with separate backup companies. You saw a lot of companies that had bought backup companies and kind of folded them into their either PSA or RMM, or in some instances, you had RMM companies that bought PSAs and left backup out and said, hey, we'll let anybody sort of contribute to that. And we looked at a couple of things. We looked at the fractured experience that was happening on the contracts, where MSPs were sort of being forced, if you will, to sign contracts and not have the flexibility to ebb and flow the same way their users were, paying for software, paying for storage that they necessarily weren't using anymore. And then we also saw that we were in a unique position to be able to introduce a remote connectivity platform, because everybody was partnering with remote connectivity tools. And they were kind of going, hey, yeah, you have all these, you have everything in one bill, but you have 5 different support teams you got to call, because if it's the Connect platform, you have to call that. If it's the backup platform, you got to call that company. Oh, we're the RMM company. Oh, somebody else is the PSA company. And so we took a step back and said, what do we want to be? And we said, well, what we want to do is we want to give all the tools in a very easy to consume format, the way an MSP wants, in a very efficient and effective way. And so that sort of came out to be our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal, was to be the number one MSP platform on the planet. And everybody goes, oh, cool. That's really funny, Brian. I'm like, great. What's it mean? I'm like, I don't know. It means that if you're starting a managed service provider business, you should be able to sign up for QuickBooks and MSP 360, have all the tools to protect on both the data and the endpoint side, all of your infrastructure. So Linux, Mac, Windows, and you should be able to pretty much do next, finish, done, deploy policies. The default policies should enable you to be cyber compliant. They should enable you to have confidence that the data is going to be there. They should enable you to see risks and how to avert them very quickly and efficiently without having to dig into logs and SIMs and everything else to be able to get to the bottom of what's happening. And so we sort of started off on that mission. And so we took a backup platform and we started to build RMM. And at the same time, right around the pandemic, everybody was going home. We had just also rolled out our Connect platform. So what became MSP 360 Remote Desktop, which eventually evolved into Connect, we gave away, had over 200,000 downloads of that product during the pandemic for people to use and be able to support their users at home. We gave it to MSPs for free. We then, in late 2021, we launched the RMM as an MVP, and we took a lot of feedback from the community, and we turned around and we started to evolve that platform to leverage the tools they use today, like Bash. Right? If you're in Linux and you're a Mac, you're using a Bash script and you don't want to rewrite those. Or if it's PowerShell and you're in Windows, we wanted you to be able to leverage the PowerShell scripts you've already written. And we wanted you to be able to leverage our platform securely to be able to execute both of those. At the same time, we wanted to give you the ability to be able to back up your product and be able to store it in object lock or any kind of, sort of vault, for lack of better words. If you're on Azure, if you're on Amazon, if you're on Wasabi, if you're on Backblaze B2, all those popular platforms which our MSPs use, we wanted to be able to give them the capability to be confident that their data is going to be there in the event of a breach. And then last but not least is, as we kind of started out 2022, we finished a full roll to the channel. So we were always selling to MSPs, but we were allowing businesses to come in and buy direct. Mm-hmm. And so as the platform evolved and as the MSPs became more excited, we realized that, hey, there's a channel conflict here where businesses are coming in. And so we said, well, all of our flexibility in pricing, no contracts, month to month, that's only for MSPs. MSPs get the best price. MSPs get better pricing even than our resellers get. Our resellers are then able to handle any of the businesses that are coming in, and they quote and manage those businesses, and then they manage that relationship with us. And now no longer can a business come in and say, hey, I know what my MSP is paying. I don't have to go quote and come back and say, hey, you shouldn't make $10 per endpoint. It's, well, if you're a business, you actually have to go buy from a partner. And just sort of a testament to our transition to the channel. There's been some recent businesses that have come in and said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and check MSP pricing, and I'm going to go ahead and put everything in. And they put the credit card in and they purchase. And sometimes they do this really fast with the idea that they think that we're not going to call and check up. And then we call them and we say, hey, it's really cool. I really like that you love our platform, but unfortunately, you're not a managed service provider. So I understand that you've seen the pricing and you see what it is, but you have to either go buy from a managed service provider in order to use this platform, or you need to go to a reseller, and you have 30 days to do that. We're going to we'll give you 1 month at MSP price, but then after that, you have to transition to business price. Wow. And that price can sometimes be upwards of like 4 to 5 times what they're paying. And of course, they're not happy, and they say, well, we're going to go somewhere else. And then they come back and say, okay, well, 4 to 5 times is still much more cost effective than what the other players. And we like the way that the platform can be used, and we like the least privilege functions that we have, and we like all these things you guys are doing. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to buy it from, IT1 or GHA, some of our channel partners, Keter Tech. Those are our 3 big ones in the United States. And so as we start to work with them, there's been a couple instances where businesses have said, you know what, if you don't honor this price, then I'm going to leave. And we say, okay, we're not going to allow you to purchase direct from us and actually undermine the channel. We believe in the channel and where it's going. And so that's been sort of the transition on both the platform and the business side over the last 5 years. Introduction of RMM, introduction of Connect, coupled with our backup product, and then the full pivot to the channel, making MSP pricing the most cost-effective pricing, the most flexible, no contracts. Businesses have to buy at least for 1 year, and they're going to pay significantly more.
Wow, man, there's so many nuggets in there. One thing that you mentioned, and as I was kind of poking around on the platform and kind of getting familiar with it, you mentioned that you kind of start with this concept of security first, mm-hmm. right? Where I think some vendors, talk a good game,
sure.
But then a lot of vendors, they say their value proposition is that, you basically, it's a ground up build, right? You turn on what you think you should turn on. You turn on, reporting logs, whatever. And you bring it to this, this state that you desire, right? But the approach you guys are taking is, hey, this is an optimal, security, state, right? And then you have the ability to kind of toggle, based on the customer or based on the role, what have you. Seems like that's in my opinion, it seems like a smarter way to deploy.
It is, and mostly that comes from our experience that when a breach occurs, and the first question that we ask is, did you have object lock on, right? And they say no, and we say, right. They say, we didn't even know you offered that, or tell us a little bit more about how that works. And, okay, well, did you do 3-2-1? Do you have it at a couple different locations? Yes, I do. Okay. So then we're able to get the data back, right? But it's a lot easier to be able to pull the data from the cloud where it was to begin with. And then you start talking to them about all the different options that are out there. And the MSP goes like, look, all I want to know is that when I run that backup, that my data is going to be there no matter what, especially when it comes to cyber compliance and making sure that my customers have cybersecurity insurance. And I'm going to do the right things that are going to enable them for that policy to be in effect so that my errors and omissions doesn't kick in, right? There's just a recent lawsuit, $1 million lawsuit from a law firm to an MSP and another backup provider. I don't want to use any names because, both of these guys right now are in a tough spot. And basically the law firm is saying, hey, we relied on both of you for the data protection side of life, the configuration and getting everything up and running. And so we look at it and we say, hey, when you set things up right out of the gate, we suggest you use object locking. Do you want to enable object locking on in your Wasabi platform, in your Amazon platform, Azure platform, or Backblaze? Yes. Okay, now that's enabled. Now let's start the backups. Sometimes, people set an object lock policy might be a little long, and we were able to work with our relationships with Wasabi and Amazon and Azure and those guys to be able to say, hey, can you release this vault? Let's work together, get it tuned, and then let's make sure that we're optimizing your storage footprint the right way. And then the confidence starts to build. And then from there, when they get into the endpoint side of life, we have what comes out right away is, hey, are all your security patches up to date? Here's the third-party patch tool that we just implemented, which is WinGet. We're getting ready to look at Chocolate for all the other platforms that are out there, so that way it tells you, hey, these systems and these programs are susceptible because the best practices aren't in place. And then, things like firewall or a EDR EPP, our chosen one is Deep Instinct, and they work quite well in the MSP space. They have a better efficacy rate than their other competitors that are sitting out there. At least from what we've seen, and especially a lot of the Microsoft tests, they have around a 99% efficacy rate. I think some of the other competitors have somewhere like the best is probably around 85%, right? I mean, that's still 15% error, right? Sure. Yeah, if you had those kind of chances that 85% of the time the plane was going to land, you probably wouldn't get in that plane. Right. 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 Yep. So we look at it as, if I have an 85% chance that my endpoint's going to be protected proactively, what other platform is out there that allows for me to take advantage of that's closer to 100% staying ahead of it? And the answer is Deep Instinct. So that's why we picked that partnership. The other reason why we picked that partnership and we didn't build our own was because I feel like it's sort of like a fox in the hen house kind of thing. When you buy a storage or a security platform and or like an EPP EDR, and you add it into your platform, all of a sudden, what's the first thing you do? You whitelist all your tech, right? Your whole stack. Yeah. Yep. So the minute your stack becomes compromised, it's whitelisted. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And so this way, having this independent view, there's been some instances where we have our own technology has been flagged by Deep Instinct, and we're on the phone with them saying, hey, we did all of these things. We registered everything correctly, but you guys work with us. They jump on it right away. They get their brain trained. They work through it. They go through a test to make sure it hasn't been breached. And they come back to us and they go, guys, it looks good. We'll go ahead and make the adjustment on the signatures. Thanks for letting us know. We're getting a little bit better at making sure we're being more proactive with that. My point is that I don't know any other vendor out there that wants to sit down and will admit that when the product gets out, if the EDR EPP kicks it up, we trust the EDR EPP to tell us, hey, is something going wrong? If it is, then stop it. If it's not, then we'll work with them to figure it out. I realize it's a little bit of pain for the MSP to have not a few backups run for maybe a day or so. But at the same time, we don't want to make sure that our agent is the one that's causing a problem, right? And then on the data side of life, if you're actually have everything set up to have object locking and things like that in place, the end result is the data is going to be there when you need it. And there's one other thing that we do that's probably a little bit different. Every failed restore, I'm on it. Me personally, everyone. It's a culture of accountability. It is not, everybody in this organization knows that we don't do a backup just to do a backup. We do a backup to make sure that the data is there. And if we ever have a situation where we're unable to get the data back, we pay to rehydrate the drive. We will pay to fix the drive and bring it back and move on. my dev team still works with that data set to find out what went wrong, how to bring it back, work through it, find out, make sure it's resolved, make sure that is it an error message or is it a warning? What does it really mean? And I started that culture of accountability in 2019 when we started to have some of these bubbles. I said, I want to be on these calls because I want to understand. As a former IT guy myself a long time ago, when I would run backups and my boss would call me and say, hey, I accidentally deleted the accounting drive by accident and all the payroll files. Could you do me a favor and bring it back? There's nothing more daunting than thinking in the back of your mind, oh shit, did that run okay last week? Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And then you're going, oh my, like, what am I going to do? And you go off and you run that tape and you're like, all right, it's there. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you get the phone call in from accounting and they're like, hey, we know that Mike accidentally deleted this, but I see that like all the data is a week old. Can you like increment it up, or do we have to go back and find all those transactions, reconcile everything from the bank accounts, do all these things again? You're like, oh. So you start stepping it up. Maybe you get to 24 hours within, that restore. Every MSP deals with that every day. And so that's just why, you have to have that confidence that data's there and it's going to come back. And it's great when we're at shows where we hear customers come say, you saved our ass. Like, yeah, great. That's what we're here for.
I was just pulling up the product reviews on the site, and on the backup side. And yeah, I mean, I think the industry agrees that you guys are moving fast and doing some great things. And so, you kind of mentioned, and I love the fact that you're jumping on. You talk about this concept of accountability, or there's that concept out there of extreme accountability. You think that's one of the reasons why you guys have scaled and developed as fast as you guys have over the last couple of years? Because it seems like, I mean, there's development at lightning pace, but then there's excellent development at lightning pace, and then having raving fans. So I mean, it seems like that might be part of the ethos there.
So look, the development team is like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, their commitment to customers, the feedback channel that we have, like there's a website, feedback.msp360.com, that has all of our roadmap items listed on it. All of any challenge that somebody has and comes up, people post it there. It's pretty much, there's no real moderation when it comes to posting the content. I mean, and the comments, like if you want something, if it's important to the community is going to go in and they're going to upvote it. And then the R&D team starts looking at how does this get out and how do we do it? And how do we eat that elephant one bite at a time, and really serve it in a way in which people can consume it and we make the right decision. I mean, this is one of the best dev teams I've ever worked with in my life. And they're really fast. They're agile. Attention to detail is amazing. They're very, 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 I want to say like respectful and cautious when they start making backup changes, and the way in which we were pulling data together and how we were archiving it and how we were retrieving it. They said, hey, look, when I first, I think it was 2020, our restore time, from an image was like hours. If it was like 350, 400 gig, it could be a couple of hours. Now it's like seconds to minutes because of their dedication to actually saying, hey, we want to improve the customer experience. We're very customer experience focused. Every year we run our own internal survey. It's to our own MSPs. We don't really socialize it. We talk to them what matters to them, where they think that we should improve. We look at how we're moving up market and if we're still taking care of the lower end of the market of the guys that got us there. And we try to make sure we keep that balance because they have different needs. But as the platform evolves, it can't become so complicated that it's hard to use. That's why the founders themselves, Andre and Alex, sat down one day and they said, hey, this was like late in 2020, beginning of 2023. They said, we want to focus on scalability and usability for the next 18 months. We want to make it so that the low end of the customer base just gets it and it works. And we want to make it so that the high end of the customer base, that the bigger guys that are out there running 7, 10, 20,000 endpoints, they're able to manage it effectively and easily as well. And so they went off on that mission by working with customers at all ends of the spectrum. We hired a VP of product management, Oleg Sapone, who's been great. I worked with him at Netrix. And he's gone and he's kind of dove in and he said, hey, this is where sort of some of our challenges are. We hired the UI experts that we brought in. We hired the more developers, and we just sat down, and then they started kind of just deploying and updating. And then we started to get, you start getting you see the feedback coming back at the shows. Hey, I noticed these changes and this is getting easier. And I'd really wish you guys would work on this. Our next big feed is kind of like a new licensing rewrite that allow you to dynamically change licenses on the fly from different versions, auto deploy from a pool rather than having to assign, post payment mode. What we call post payment mode is consumption, only available for MSPs. That actually works more like Slack or something like that, where you add an endpoint on, you're only charged for the time that you use it, and then if you take it off, it's deactivated. It's really that simple. And so we're trying to basically improve that, and that's all based on customer feedback. And then the RMM side was all built the same way. We started off with an MVP. We had 350 people that signed up right away. We started to charge for it and went to like 10. We were like, okay, so 10 people are willing to pay us. So you're like, okay, now what are we going to do? Right. So you start to talk to those 10, and then you start to find out why everybody else didn't like it and what was happening. And the dev team that was running that went ahead and dug into all the feedback. And then they just started moving through better alerting, better tagging, better reporting. And then it was, okay, now we're kind of getting to a point where third-party patching has become critical. They went off and they did a lot of research, and they came back and said, hey, WinGet is the way to go. I wasn't so sure if WinGet was the way to go, but they were convinced, and they implemented WinGet, and we saw a big jump. And now, we're almost at 400 customers using it. We're hundreds of thousands of endpoints are protected now. At least 50,000 plus endpoints now are protected, on our way to 100,000. And people, the MSPs, again, our model works for them because it's, in one hand, backup, everybody gets charged per endpoint. But on the other hand, they're like, you know what? I don't back up everything. I want to be charged per admin in the RMM. And we looked at those models and we said, should we do per endpoint or should we do per admin? And while it was a little harder to position it in the market, it was the MSPs don't like to be penalized for monitoring things. And that's how they look at it. Yeah. So they said, you know what? Just because I'm an admin and I'm monitoring, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily charging for it. I could just be looking at it and I might have to make a different decision. And so we said, well, then let's go per admin in this case and per endpoint in that. And they said, awesome. And so we're working on refining some of those market position tactics, especially around the way the quote calculator and things like that work on our website. But absolutely, the customer feedback and the getting that to the product team and getting it to the dev team to be able to implement it it's really, really the support from the dev team to make the product-led growth easier has been amazing. Can't ask for anything more.
That's great to hear, because if you go out on, and I try not to do this often, but you go out on some of the Reddit boards,
sure.
Especially because you're in a tough market, right? I mean, in the sense that, you back up in RMM particularly, right? They're mature product categories. Yeah. And to make a dent in those product categories, I mean, you have to be on point. Yeah. Because, RMM, maybe you talk about sticky products and ones that are difficult to displace, maybe back up a little bit less so, but that's a challenge, right? And so to gain the adoption that you guys have gained as fast as you guys have come out and started iterating is pretty impressive, because you have the legacy, the big guys, the Kaseyos of the world, and you have this whole kind of group of upstarts that are out there as well. And you guys, seemingly just based on this approach, this kind of platform approach, have you've made a lot of traction over the last couple of years.
You bring up Reddit, so we have a board, right? And when we meet once a quarter, and one of the members on our board says, if you ever really want to know what's going on with a product, just go to Reddit. Right? They're the most critical and also at the same time honest when it comes to praise group. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what product. It could be just backup product. It could be the MSP subreddit, right? Yep. Those guys, they're going to tell you exactly how they feel and exactly what they think is wrong. And then from there, it's up to you as an organization to say, all right, how do I take that feedback and how can I internalize it and make it actionable so that things get better? And I mentioned we were talking a little bit beforehand that one of the coolest compliments in 2024 was there was a person that said, "Hey, has anybody taken a look at the MSP360 RMM lately?" And somebody said, "Well, I did about a year ago, and it's not very good, right?" And another person comes in and says, "Well, you might want to take a look at it now. They're about 6 months from Ninja." And to us, that's a huge compliment because Ninja has really set the standard for, really just being an RMM. They're one of the better ones out there, and they're really easy to operate, really easy to install, really easy to understand. They're a great partner for ours when it comes to the integrated backup piece as well, because we have an integrated component with them. But to have that kind of compliment come with like guys like Sal and his team building a product like that tells me that not only are we on the right track, but we're starting to gain a lot of credibility in the market, and that was exciting. That really was like, hey, we may not be the best RMM yet, but we definitely just, maybe base camp 2 on Everest, we just put a flag. Yeah. And so as we start to move up market and as we start to see kind of how the MSPs react and how we're growing and what we're doing, that they'll continue to give us that honest feedback. And when I go in the boardroom and they pull up the Reddit thread, hey, there's always positive things and good criticism that's out there. So I couldn't thank the Reddit community enough.
Cool, because that can be a double-edged sword, that whole community. I love them, but sometimes you wonder what you're walking into for some of these comments, and then you watch these threads transpire and just like, oh my goodness. So but it sounds like you guys handle it pretty openly and transparently, so that's pretty cool.
Every time I've ever been involved in that community, openness and transparency has always played well. If you try to hide it or you try to, then you get the frowny face, right?
you get snuffed out pretty quick.
Yeah, right. And then it goes from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you guys have been on this, toward pace, you're moving really fast. As you look forward, like what are the things that you guys need to do to really, outpace the competition, or what's on the roadmap, I guess over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
So, sometimes you should integrate and not build, right? And we started to look around at like a PSA, and we see a lot of the MSPs, they have their thing for ConnectWise, right? That's sort of like the continuum love-hate sort of ConnectWise world, and we're pretty integrated with ConnectWise. We're looking at making that PSA integration much more robust, much easier to understand, make it a lot easier to be able to do billing and tickets and things like that from our platform. The second thing that we're introducing is an alert-based API, as well as we'll call it, there'll be several other data points and features there that'll allow you to integrate with any other PSA that supports Zapier. So an MSP can go and sign up for Zapier. He pays his $30 a month, and now all of a sudden he's completely integrated with Halo. Or he decides, I want to use Synchro, or I want to use, any of the n number of PSAs out there. And as those PSAs grow and get better, Halo, we hear that more and more and more and more and more. And we feel like that's a good partnership for us longer term. So you'll see that those integration, that ability, that flexibility, and the usability in that space, in the integration space for us, should become much more robust and much easier to understand. We're working really, really, really hard on, and we talked about this, the security first approach, making sure those templates are really designed to make sure that everybody's got the best practices in place. We're one of the backup providers that are featured on a lot of insurance companies' websites now as being cybersecurity compliant, so that cyber policies are in effect because we check all the boxes and everything is there. And then we're going to work a lot on just being able to replicate and do DR. You're going to see a big pivot probably close to the end of this year when we introduce some of those features. We can do it today in a manual way. We want to automate that, especially in the Azure and the EC2 Amazon space. We might be able to do it as well with some of the other hyperscalers that you're starting to see come out that are connecting to guys like Wasabi and Backblaze, their third-party hyperscalers that they're using. We can do it today in Wasabi with their hyperscaler, but there's a couple of bumps there. We want to make it easier, right? Much easier, so that it can just stand up and be up and running. And then, of course, with inside your four walls. So we want to be able to help MSPs repurpose hardware they've already purchased, even from other vendors. So, if you had potentially a Datto box, you would be able to run an MSP 360 hyper virtual machine on that system using our own platform, so that they can repurpose things. I mean, nobody likes to be in long-term contracts. Nobody likes 1 year, 3 year. I understand why they do it, because it helps with with churn, and it helps with making sure that the brand is always there and you're working and you're growing. But what's funny is we see in our world that because we don't have a contract, we end up with a lot of brand loyalty. We end up with a lot of MSPs that come to us and say, you know what, I don't want to do the 1 year or the 3 year capital outlay. I don't want to do the 1 year, 3 year, and constantly trying to fight and keep my contracts at minimum and call my rep and reduce and my number of endpoints. I just want to be able to ebb and flow as my business ebb and flows. And I don't want that stress. I want the stress of growing, but I don't want the stress of managing my tool set, so to speak. And so you'll see us continue to refine that process so that licensing is easier to understand, provisioning is easier to understand, and then managing your infrastructure, reporting, and all of that kind of effectiveness would be easier to understand. If you were saying sort of what's our goal in the next 2 years there, I call it, if I was the CEO of an MSP and I had 100,000 endpoints, I should have a Twitter version of what's happening in my infrastructure based off of the priority of where I should be focused. You had 19 security events. You had 12 accounts that have accidentally been, or that were elevated in privileges. You had, right? So you had this many backups that failed in core critical systems, and then there's everything else afterwards. So when I wake up in the morning and I'm going to my operations team, I'm like, you guys on it? Yeah. What are you working on first? We're working on the account elevations, and we're working on these security issues, and then we're working on these core systems that weren't backed up effectively, and we're going to solve all that, and then we'll deal with the user tickets after the fact, right? That helps them get their day going and kind of keep things in line with what should happen. That should be our goal. Our goal should be making sure that that they're aware before, right? There's nothing worse for an MSP to get a phone call that says, hey, my systems aren't working, I think I've been hacked, right? The better phone call is, hey, Mr. Customer, I think somebody's installed something in your environment. We've caught it. Yeah. We've actually locked everything down. You might have a few challenges today while we work through it and kind of clean things up, but we need to educate this user as to what it is that they installed and find out why they still have permissions to actually be able to install something. That's the better phone call, right? That's the proactive MSP. That's the guy that woke up in the morning and said, something is not happening well at this dental office, at this chiropractor place, at this accounting firm, right? That's the place we want them to be. Easily. Yeah. They just see it and they know what to do.
So we should always end on a high note, but I have to ask.
Sure.
You said some of your biggest successes have been this rebrand and rapid growth of MSP 360, but you also said something about a certain incident, an accounting incident at a large company that still haunts you to this day. Care to elaborate on that, or
yeah,
or
absolutely.
Should we save that for another episode?
No, absolutely. So, look, you one of the fundamental things when it comes to growing, not only as a person but in your career as you move up, is we used to have this thing at Netrix we used to say all the time, and they've said it. This isn't anything new. They say it a lot at the executive roundtables, which is you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so at the time, I had never managed an accounting team. I had a lot of wins in the IT space, right? I had a lot of wins in the IT space. I had a lot of wins in the operations space, implementing systems, ERPs, all that kind of fun stuff. But I found myself, and I kind of joke around, I found myself sort of like, how do you become a goalie when you play hockey, when you're the guy that can't skate? Right? When you're 8 years old and you go out there, you're the guy that can't skate. They put you in goal. If you're playing with your buddies and everybody else that can't skate, that's how you become the goalie. And so I was growing at Netrix, and I was evolving from kind of coming from a very customer-centric and services-based world. And now I'm in operations, day-to-day operations. And I had been implementing revenue operations, supply chain operations, and things like that at large companies like Nordstrom and QVC and Best Buy and things like that all over the world. It's kind of where I will say my operational career began, but more from a service and implementation perspective. So here I am at Netrix, and I'm running human resources. I'm running, support and IT and all these sort of ancillary operational things. And the other two founders I'm there with in the three-legged stool are running product and sales and marketing, right? And as we're growing, I kind of look around like we need to bring the accounting function in house. And so this was in October. So we began implementing NetSuite, which went off really well. It took me, we started closing our books in January. In order to get it right, I closed January and July. It took 7 months of iterative mistakes and learning and growth, and then all of that happening, right? Refactoring. We deleted the whole system a couple of times. My accounting team, I thought they were gonna I was like, we have to start all over. We just purge it all. And they were like ready to wring my neck. They're like, we could do this with journal entries. I'm like, no journal entries, none of this. Like, I didn't even know what a journal entry was, right? I'm like, what the hell is a journal entry? I'm like, oh, that's hacking a database. That's the way I looked at it, right? You guys are just fudging the numbers to make it work. They're like, well, kind of. I'm like, yeah, we're not doing that, right? So we kind of started going through all that. And I learned a lot about accounting. They learned a lot about operations. My first controller was great person, didn't work out well. When she left, I kind of was like, okay, I've never run payroll before, and I've never sent a wire to Europe. Okay, so today's my first day, how to run payroll and how to get a wire, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna make sure that everybody gets paid. If I got to run to the bank and pull cash out and do what I'm supposed to do to make it happen, like on my own, right? And so we figured it out and we got it done, and then hired another controller, which it turned out to be just an amazing person. Kathy Perrin at Netrix was really, really good in that. She took on a lot of stress, grew a lot herself, kept me in check as we worked through things. We partnered really well together. And then when finally our first public audit came in, it was clean. And I was like, all right. So, right, that's when that was like a very stressful time. I was like, I said to one of the founders, I said, I'm going to die before I give up. He's like, don't do that. I'm like, I refuse to give up. This is going to happen. And so we closed January, February, March, April, in May, in July. Wow. We closed June and August. And then from that point forward, we closed July and August, and then August and September, and everything started to roll away. But, when you have all that ambiguity and all the things that you haven't done before and you're reaching out, mentors are key. One of my mentors at the time, actually still is Bill Largent, phenomenal guy, great mentor, CFO of Veeam. They couldn't really get anybody better when it comes to that kind of coaching, marketing, and sales. Ratmir helping me with that. Like, these are guys that are willing to kind of step in and say, hey, how can I help? What is it that you're struggling with? I know who you are. And they're willing, they really, truly, genuinely care that you're growing and you're getting better. And it's great to be able to have them pick up the phone. But if you don't have good mentors and you don't have people that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm running into this problem, can you help me? Just because you're the CEO, you don't have all the answers. What you're supposed to know is who to call when you're stuck. Right. And if you can't find somebody to call when you're stuck, well, then you have to work through all the ambiguity that happens and be able to figure it out on your own and go fast, right? Go fast and be dynamic. And that's some of the fun things that we get to do today. It's just bigger problems, different problems. But that experience was definitely a humbling experience for me. That was one of the hardest challenges I had, was learning accounting in like a month. I was like, okay, we'll figure this out in like 9 currencies, right? It wasn't like US accounting on QuickBooks. It was like 9 currencies. It was something. I look back at it now and I smile about it because I grew a lot. At the time, if you would have talked to me in like March or April, my blood pressure was probably 300 over 100. And I hadn't slept for 2 months. And yeah, it was a thing.
Yeah.
So
you survived. And for the record, I was a goalie until about Phantoms. So I was that kid. So yeah.
But you can skate now, right? They teach you to
skate now. Yep. I still skate every Friday morning here from the Naval Academy. But
nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Try to stay active. Good group of guys over there. So yeah.
That's great.
Look, man, you guys have like I said, I'm a super fan, I think. Just based on just the traction, the velocity, the excitement that you guys have brought to this industry. So Well done. Well done to you, man.
Hey, well, thanks, Kevin. Actually, we can't do it without people like Channel Program. I mean, really can't. I mean, at the end of the day, you guys are a great community for us to be able to talk to. You're great, the users that are there. We don't do this alone, right? We don't do it without G2. We don't do it without you. We don't. I mean, we're not able to. But that kind of feedback helps us get better, and these kind of relations help us sell more. So it's all good stuff. So great partnership, and I do appreciate the time today.
You got it. It's all good. All right, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Have a great. Take care.